And we are on the air. Thank you for tuning into Writer Chat. And tonight I'm very pleased to welcome Anita Belli to this little corner of the internet. And we're going to talk about, well, I don't know, who knows what we're going to talk about? Probably self-publishing, probably writing, and probably blogging and stuff. Anyway, hi Anita.
Hi.
Here she is. So you just...
I'll probably talk about chicken pie if that's all right.
Chicken pie. That's the name of your next book, isn't it? Chicken Pie in the Oven or something.
I have got a book plan called Watermelon Pie. That's coming later.
Blimey.
Right.
Right.
Down the line.
Crikey. Okay. So just for background, Anita and I met, strangely enough, not on the internet, as 99% of my contacts are, but in real life. And you made the trip down from North Essex to Chelmsford, where we're having a NaNoWriMo writing, and we talked about self-publishing, because you were interested and I had done a bit. And so were you, after our chat, were you inspired by that? Did you think I could do that, or did you think, not really, not for me?
No, I thought you made it sound so straightforward that I think you should run courses in how to self-publish, and we should do it online, do it together, because it really did make it all seem quite real. I'm not a technical person at all, as you could tell by just trying to find where you were on the internet tonight. I have no idea how to get here, but you made that easy as well. You just sent me a link. So you've got a knack of making things, difficult things, seem very straightforward. And it did turn out to be very straightforward when I tried to do it, but not necessarily easy, if that makes sense. It had a logical process, but there were built-in challenges with that. Particularly, I found the challenge of formatting the book was the hardest thing. This was my last Nano novel, by the way. It took me 2 years of Nano to do it, because it's over 100,000 words. And I did the first 50,000 when I had the time. I was living in Spain. I wasn't part of Nano Essex then, because I wasn't in Essex. And I wrote the first half of it, and I wrote myself into a corner, as you often do in the middle of a book. Got the beginning and the muddle, and then I didn't know where the end was going to be, although I kind of, what I thought was going to be the end, ended up not being. I completely changed it. So I decided to rewrite it, as it were, on the second Nano when I came back to England, joined Nano Essex. And I think having the group support of Nano Essex really helped me to focus it and to keep going that time. Although I did 50,000 words the first time, it was pretty much in isolation, because I was in Spain and my Spanish is nowhere near good enough to join a group online speaking in Spanish, and I'm writing in English. So, having that support. But I was very, very clear from when I started that I was going to publish this novel. That was my plan. And I'd heard everyone saying, oh, it's so easy, you can do it yourself. And I thought, well, can I? I wasn't even, barely use Facebook, and I'm still a bit, sometimes hit the wrong things. So I wasn't that sure that it was definitely for me. But I was determined to do it, and talking to you, suddenly you showed me, and I think that was the key thing. You just showed me online how to go about it, so much so that I did get quite addicted, and after I'd done the first one, I then got some short stories together and did another one, and I'm now working with someone locally who wants to publish her books, and I'm going to be helping and passing that on. I think that's a great way to work, actually, passing it on and sharing it. But I have become quite semi-addicted to it. It's Create Space is the one I'm using. So.
Yeah, it's a funny thing, isn't it? That when you start writing, after a while, all you want to do is to be published. And in the olden days, when I first started, that involved submitting to publishers or agents and waiting months for a reply and getting rejected and going around the whole sort of submit reject merry-go-round, and now that's all changed. And the first time, I mean, whenever I publish something, I always get I tend not to sell many paperback versions, but I always get a paperback book, because it's a great feeling to see the book in print and hold it in your hands, and you think, I wrote this, and it's lovely, isn't it?
There were cheers in the house when I ordered a proof. I think that was another, after the formatting, and then I discovered that there's a template you can download. All sorts of issues with formatting that just hadn't occurred to me. So I did order a proof, and when that arrived, the postman knocked on the door and handed my husband, actually, and he shouted up the stairs, and we all ran into the hallway. And it was so exciting, unwrapping the first copy. And it was all wrong, but it was I've still got that. Then I revised it. The look of it was wrong. The cover was matte, and I should have done a gloss cover. Technically, it was okay. It had passed all of their tech specs. But there was one thing I hadn't done, and it didn't occur to me until I looked at it on the page, and that was right edge formatting, justifying, that's the word, justifying it, both sides. Things like the right-hand page and the left-hand page being different and having, different, and the gully in the middle. So all sorts of issues and language crept into my vocabulary I'd never used before, not in that context anyway. It was quite an interesting process. And I'd selected white paper because I thought, and then my daughter said, but it looks too much like a textbook on white paper, because, and of course it did. It looked, and I hadn't left enough room at the tops and bottoms of pages. It just didn't look right, and my font wasn't right. When I saw it on the page, it looked fine on the screen. So all of those things, I would definitely say, get a proof. And then, the second proof was absolutely fine. And then I had it proofread by somebody else who found some mistakes, commas missing, and things. And then I corrected those, and it was okay. The other technical issue, I don't know if you found this, Gerald, is the cover. How did you cope with covers?
Pretty well. My first cover I did was for a charity book, and it's, in terms of cover design, it's not very good. It did the job, and it was because I was doing it through Smashwords at a time when they had sort of very limited capability to design the covers online. So it's a fairly sort of basic thing. I tell you what, I'll just hang on there. I'll just go and get this. It's very unprofessional. Oh dear.
That's fine. I was just going to do exactly the same, but I think I tidied mine away to the other side of the room. So.
Okay. This is. You can just about see that. Yeah. This is my first book, and this lovely lady is Mavis. Hi, Mavis, if you're watching. She's got mesothelioma, and she wrote. She was saying that she wanted to record her treatment and what was going on in her life. So she started writing a blog, and then someone said, you should write a book. And I said, well, if you want, I'll take your blog posts and put them into a book, which is what I did. So anyway, back to the subject. That was my first attempt at a cover, which is nice, and it, as I say, it does the job. But when I did my own, I sort of
I saw that one online. Yeah.
Yeah,
nice.
I mean, maybe it's a little bit too close to the top and stuff like that. But I like that style. So every cover I've worked on since then has had that same style, because I quite like my name across the bottom here and the title up there. So and you can read a lot. It takes, if you're going to self-publish and you're going to do it all yourself, as we both did, it takes quite a while to read up and to learn what to do. There are people who will offer to do it for you, but that can work out quite expensive. And you have to bear in mind how much money you're going to make per book, and whether it's actually worth you paying out hundreds of pounds or dollars to get someone to do the work for you. That's a decision to take, and there's nothing wrong in that, because people have been and still are vanity publishing, and they're prepared to pay to get a book they've written in their hands, and if that's what you want to do, then that's fine.
No, I agree, but I also think that creating covers is part of the creative process. So if you want to hang on 1 second, I'm going to get my cover and show you what I mean about how it emerged.
Yeah, sure. This is unusual. this is different. But yeah, cover design. I'll just sort of yak on. Oh, she is. That was quick. That didn't take long.
And I know they're in the dining room. This I had to put my name at the top because the title was longer. You see what I mean? Can you see that all right? And I had this painting which a friend of mine had done about 25 years ago, when we were at film school together for a film we'd made together. And I managed to track him down, his producer, David Skinner. Hello, David. Don't know if you're watching. And he made this lovely painting, so I asked him for permission, obviously, to use it. But that was the shiny one, and the first one I did. You can't see the difference, but it just feels very different,
Yeah.
The other choice, of course, that you have on CreateSpace is the size of the book, and that's quite interesting as well. What size you're going to go for? And for the collection of short stories, I went for the smaller size.
Okay. Is that an official paperback size, or is it one of these funny?
5 by 8. This one.
Okay.
That's 5 by 8, and this other one, the novel, is bigger.
Okay.
It's slightly, by about a fraction each way. And this one also is a sketch by a friend of mine who came to my house in Spain. While we were chatting on the terrace, she just sketched it, and I asked if I could use it. And I think for me, using original artwork, or I'm thinking about the next book and trying to find a friend or a family member. Quite a few artists in my little circle of people, if they'd be interested in coming up with an image for it. I just already had those images, and that was a good start. But I think it really is important, and I like your idea of the theme across all of your books. I think that's really important as well if you're creating a look.
Yeah, it's quite a self-indulgent thing, I think, in that I have this little picture in my mind of my bookcase over there with my books lined up across it, of course.
How far have you got with that then?
One. but I've got lots of covers. This is my I like you. Yeah, I think I like creating covers. I think I have an eye for a cover, and I think I know what works, and I think I know what doesn't work. And I mean, this you're talking about artwork. This was a photo I took, and it's actually of the Naze Tower near where I live.
Oh yes, I know it.
Yes. In the snow, and it's very grey and bleak. But I quite like that. But it sort of brings us on to a sort of important point. If you're going to create your own covers, you have to be careful what images you use, and that you have permission to use them, which obviously you have because you used original artwork. But
and credit as well.
Yes, it's
credit for the artwork as well, inside and on the cover. It's important.
That's a good point. Yeah, because it's very easy to Google an image and think that'll do. I'll slap that on the cover. But you could, like as not, if your book just sort of trundles along, nothing much will happen. But at some point, someone will say, "Oi, you can't use that image because it's mine." So if you go to some of the image sites like Shutterstock and some of the other ones, there are options there and you can look at the licensing arrangements and pay accordingly. But original artwork is the best, I think.
I think it's fair enough because artists need to eat as well and earn some money if you can. I mean, I've been fortunate I didn't have to pay for those. They were kind of gifts, if you like. But, you know, I'm prepared to pay small amounts, I don't very much. But, you know, I am aware that artists earn their living doing this just as, you know, and I wouldn't like someone just to steal a whole chunk of my book and put it up somewhere and, you know, have some benefit or advantage from that. I think that's fair enough.
I think it's absolutely right. It's all too easy to use things that you find on the internet these days. But if someone has gone to some effort to create this piece of artwork or take this photo or something, then it's right that they're paid for it. And you can find, you know, it usually only costs a few dollars for an image, and if it's the front of your book and it's the right image, then it's totally worth it, in my opinion.
Coming back to the point you made earlier about plenty of people on the internet will do it for you, and you know, you can pay to have these things done. And one of the things I found refreshing when I spoke to you about self-publishing was that you made it clear that I didn't have to pay anyone to do any of this, because what I was coming up against when I was reading all these things online about how to publish a book, they're usually written by people who want to sell you their services to publish your book. And so I kept coming up to a point where it was then, you know, there was always a bit missing. There was always something that I couldn't quite get over without, and I think I said this to you at the time, you know, you mean you can do it without having to pay anyone anything for, you know, at some point. And I know I have a friend who self-publishes and pays someone to kind of proof and edit. I mean, I was fortunate in that I had someone who could proof. One of my family did that. And I think if you can get a professional critique, I think that's really valuable. But I just use readers. I use people I know who read this kind of book and had feedback. I don't know whether you do that, whether you have readers and how you do it.
Oh yes, yeah. I have my wife is I'm my alpha reader, because I'm pretty good at reading my own stuff after it's sort of been left for a few weeks. I can come back to it and read it and do the preliminary edits. But my wife's my beta reader. She's an avid reader, and she's an honest critic too, which is what you have to be. You have to have someone who's going to tell you the truth. And I've seen self-published books that have been through edits and editors and proofreaders and stuff, and still found things that are horrible. You know, the full stops are in the right place, and the capital letters are all in the right place, but the actual writing itself. And I looked at one this morning. This afternoon, one was recommended to me, and I thought that sounds really good. You know, sort of mystery and a bit of supernatural, and I got third paragraph in, and someone gasped from their bosom, and I thought, what? What? You don't gasp from a bosom, and it just ruined it for me. I just thought that's really bad writing. So yeah, you have to. If you are going to pay, there's no guarantee that you're going to get a professional service. But most editors will do a sample of 1,000 words or a chapter for free, so you can put problems in there and see how they deal with it.
Okay.
But by the same token, you have to have, if you're not going to go to a professional editor, you need to have someone who's good at reading and who will say, no, that's not right, it doesn't work well.
I also, because I was writing historical, set in the 1950s mostly, and then flashing back to the Second World War, I can be fairly anachronistic, not so much in, you know, putting, I don't know, a mobile phone in the middle of somewhere that it didn't happen, but in terms of the language I use, which, you know, language has also evolved, and so my husband, who is a very prolific reader and quite expert on that period, My daughter, who is also a very prolific reader, but mostly of contemporary chick lit and that sort of thing, wrote a fairly eclectic reader. But I had those two as my main readers. And it's led, and they became my researchers as well. So I would turn to my husband at one point and say, what would the street lamps be like in London in 1953? And he'd go, well, off the top of my head, and my daughter would say, I'll Google it, Mum. And this became my kind of, what I call my research team. And they kind of, I can come up with questions that, and also, particularly with my daughter, I run the plot and the scenario by her. And whilst I was preparing the chicken pie, she was sitting with me in the kitchen, and we were just talking about, she was telling me books she's read which had an unsatisfactory ending rather than an unhappy ending. We talk about endings and what makes something unsatisfactory. It's not so much the ending as the resolution, that things haven't been fully worked out. And it's almost like it's got sequels stamped all over it, because there's more to happen. And so avoiding that, and during the last book, The Art Forger's Daughter, which was my book I published, I was running by the ending, and this is when I changed it, and she said, if that happens, I will throw that book across the room and not read anymore. And I thought, well, she does represent a large chunk of my main readership, which is young to, women, basically, from 25 or all women, but it does represent quite a large portion of my reader. And those views are quite valuable, those sort of insights, and particularly someone who is prolific and reads a lot of different things. And I find that very useful, very valuable.
I think it's true. I mean, coming back to the subject of paying to self-publish, it's if you read. I mean, I was reading Joe Conrath for years, and when he started self-publishing, it sort of started a whole sort of exciting time for me. And he says, and other people say, you have to get someone to do your cover for you. You have to get someone to proofread and copy edit and developmental edit. So people like him and some others are paying like $1,000 to self-publish their book, which is fine for them because they've got a huge back catalogue of work, and they are making quite a lot of money from it. And also they're based in America, which there's a bigger audience out there for their work. So it's possible, but the first book I published, it was for a charity, so we didn't want to spend anything to publish the book because that would reduce the amount of money that we could give to the charity. So that was an experiment for me really to see what it was all about and what self-publishing was about, and it's made over £1,000 for the charity.
Wow!
Yeah, it's
that's amazing.
It's good. She's a popular lady, and she's it's a good, honest story, and there's not many honest stories of people with terminal illness. So it's done very well. So it's and so from that I thought, well, that went okay. Yes, the cover could be better, but there's nothing frightening about it. But it is, as you say, there are challenges on the way, and it can be a bit frustrating at times.
I think you've raised a really important aspect of self-publishing there, which is selling the book. Because I always said, in the past, I've always said writing the book is the easy bit, getting it published is the hard bit. Because you have all of these gatekeepers, the agents and the publishers, just getting it read by people and getting, to that point is really hard. And even when you get that, I had an agent and things were going really well, just moving it on to the next level to get the editorial to actually buy it and to support what it is you're doing. All of those barriers were huge. And so that was a challenge. Now I would say get rid of all of those challenges, do it all yourself, publish it. then you've got to sell the thing. And, you know, for me, it's less about making money, although that would be wonderful. I've barely covered the wine tab at the moment with the sales. It's not really, you know, a get-rich-quick thing by any means for me. And I just wonder, you know, what more I can do in terms of marketing, because I think it's really challenging. I'm doing some Christmas fairs coming up in Colchester, and one in Harwich. One at the Minries in Colchester and one in Harwich over December. I've got the book into 3 venues, bookshops in Colchester and Frenton bookshop at Caxton's, and also a gallery down in Harwich, and online and tweeting and, you know, blog posts, daily blog posts, all of that stuff. And it's proving to be, you know, lots of people, 4,500 people go to my website, to my blog, and you just think in a month, every month, and yet it's still not biting. Do you know what I mean? It's really, and I've had some really good reviews as well. So I don't know if you've got any, if you know what else I guess that's what you can do.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I've read, and for anybody watching, what used to be the best place to go for information about self-publishing was Kindle boards, which used to be called Kindle boards, but then Amazon got a bit shirty about it, so it's now kboards.com, and there's a writer's cafe, and it's all about self-publishing, and there are I think white pages, they call them, with editors and cover designers and stuff. So it's one of these places where it works very well. It's very busy, so lots of people post every day. You can spend hours doing it, but the principal thing from there, and I haven't been on there for a couple of months, but I think the principal thing through the Kindle boards was when people said, how can I sell more of my book? The answer is, write another one.
Yes.
And that's time and again people say it's hard to sell and market a single book, and I know you've got 2, but one's a collection, so it sort of, in a way, it doesn't count. But I think it's, and I'm not in that position either of having, you know, more than one book out. So I think it seems to be that you have to have that sort of collection, if you like, a number of books, so people, I think it elevates you above the single book writer, and people think, oh, you know, you've written all these things, so you must be a reasonable writer.
I think that's advice I've come across as well online, is write the first book and then write this. The other quote I love is that the first page sells this book and the last page sells the next book. And, you know, so that multiples of. But if it's taking over a year for each one, which it will, you know, it's kind of a lot of work involved, and particularly now, with the book I'm writing now is set in the Spanish Civil War, so there's, again, I seem to like love stories and war thereby, and art as well are my key themes. This one involves Picasso in the Spanish Civil War, and a love story, obviously, on different sides of the, you know. It creates a natural conflict. It's a great theatre, great background, but it does mean a lot of research. And I've got to a point now where I've just started writing about the war, the timeline, and I need to, before I can write the next bit, I do need to do some research. And I'm thinking, but I just want to write the last 5,500 for this challenge, words. So I might leave a gap. I think it's allowed. You don't have to write consistent, you know, consecutive narrative. You can leave a gap and write the next bit that I can skip, the detailed bit that I need some more research. But actually all the motivations for how they behave are in that war. You know, it's the thing that spurs them into where they end up being. So those things in themselves are quite challenging as well, and it takes quite a long time. So I'm just going to have to be patient, I think.
I think so, and I think once you have multiple books out, you can then reduce the price of one of them to 0, or do low-cost giveaways, or things like that. All sorts of other things come into play to get people into your writing. But I know it's hard, and I think if anybody goes into writing and self-publishing with the intention of making lots of money, it's really not going to work. I don't think. I think whatever percentage it was of writers that got traditionally published, which was pretty low, 1 or less than 1%. It's probably even worse for self-publishers for a writer that's going to be successful at it. But if you're a writer, you're a writer, and you're going to write anyway. That's the thing. You're in it for the long game. I'm in it for the long game. I write a lot. I love writing, and if I can cover a bar bill, a wine bill with it, then great. I'll be really happy.
It's a good start. I think that's a very good starting point. I think for me, my overriding sort of thing is that I want my books to be read. I think there's an ingredient when you're writing. You're putting a lot into this, and I think the additional ingredient that you need to leave room for in the writing is the reader, and that's something I've learned through publishing the first book. Is I tended to try and I didn't leave enough space for the reader to actually bring what they bring to the story. And I've had some really positive feedback from people, their reactions to the story, which have made me realise that it's not so much what I say, but what they're hearing that actually, and everyone's going to be different. Do you know what I mean? But I think you do need to leave that space for them to have a response and to have some sort of interpretation. Be as clear as, with the story. But actually, I tend to overwrite the kind of emotional thing underneath it. It's a bit like when you watch a film and there's really cheesy music telling you how you should feel about this, and you think, actually, I know what I feel about this situation. I don't really need, the mood music to the background of my story was a bit too, perhaps too obvious, I found. In the first draft, I did manage to. I'm not selling my book very well, I did manage to, but it's a learning curve. That's the thing, isn't it? Writing is learning as you go.
It is, and I was going to say anyone can write a story. Almost anyone can write a story. Whether it's readable is one thing. Whether it's enjoyable to the readers is another thing. And there's a huge learning process in learning how to create an enjoyable story, and that's even if you can string words together that make sense in a sentence with the bits at the front and the back, it's very, very difficult to create an enjoyable story, and I think that's where you have to have people, as we said before, sort of honest critics who will read your work and say, not just say, oh, it's wonderful, you've written something excellent. It will actually say, I enjoyed the story, but I felt this person wasn't very well formed, or I felt like you said, I tend to overwrite things, especially because most of our writing is in word count challenges, so I just sort of blast out anything that's going on in my head, and it's to then then have to go back over that and think, I don't need to say this, I don't need to make all these points about this person. It's obvious from this one description or this one thing that they say in the dialogue that's how they're feeling, and as you say, you've got to. It's good to let the reader fill in the blanks and make them work a little harder at it.
And be implicit by their behaviour, let them describe how they feel rather than you telling the reader how they feel. But for example, today I made a big cardinal sin of Nano, which is I decided I only had a gap between doing one thing and having to be at an appointment. I had about 20 minutes. Well, I can't really start writing anything, so I started reading what I'd done yesterday. And I took out the first chapter 17 I was up to, and I took out the first paragraph of chapter 17 because I knew I'd done it quite, just written it off the top of my head. What I was looking at was something I'd put on my blog about how do you establish time and place quite succinctly when you're starting the scene. How do you establish where they are? So I decided that this was set New Year, 1936 in Spain. The Spanish Civil War started in the summer of that year. So I had him in the town square with all the revelers. They love fiestas in Spain, eating 12 grapes, which is a Spanish custom. And so as he eats the 12 grapes, and before the clock chimes 12, you have to have eaten 12 grapes. If you don't, it's going to be a disastrous year. And the fact that he managed to do it meant that 1936 was going to be a wonderful year. Ultimate irony. So I thought, okay, so that's how I'm going to set time and place. So I wrote this scene, this paragraph. And this morning, just as an exercise, whilst I was waiting for an appointment, I pasted it into Word, and I edited it from 80 words down to 41 words, just to make it tighter. And then after my appointment, just while I was having lunch, I came back to it, and I cut it down to about 35 words. And it was that process of, just tightening. So it's about 4 lines, 3 lines, and it's very much tighter and more succinct without, and I think, for me, the big thing I've learned so I've always written loads of stuff. I've written novels, 4 novels, 5 before this one, before the one I published. And it's actually learning to edit your own work, I think, is to me the most important and the steepest learning curve. Not just taking words out, but thinking, I haven't explained that enough, I haven't given any background or context. It can't just sit there like that. The thing about Nano is just getting the thing down, isn't it? That's what I find so good.
Yeah, I think one of the things, it's always a bit of a misnomer, because what you end up at the end of the month is nothing like a novel. It's nothing, it's the start of something. But I always try and say that it's a way of telling a story, and if you can finish the story within the month or so, then you can then see the story in its entirety. And does it work? Does it have a beginning, a middle, and an end? Does it make sense? Is the plot reasonable? Are the characters interesting? Then you can craft that into something that's going to be enjoyable to read. And I think you either have to have help with doing that, which is where developmental editors come in, or you have to have experience of writing and have writing critiques, and to be able to know, like you did, you took a paragraph and chopped it, and I used to write a lot of very short fiction. I used to write a lot of flash fiction, much of which was limited word count. So it would be a 100-word story on one of half a dozen prompts. So one of them would resonate with me, so I'd go blah 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 blah, 350 words, and I would think, well, I've told the story. How can I reduce it? And then when you start chopping and chopping and chopping and rewriting, you get a great 100-word story from 350 words of blather and sort of, again, it tells the story, a bit like Nano, it tells the story, but it's not very good. It's not an enjoyable reading experience. And it's by editing and by practice at editing that you can develop the skills necessary to edit your own writing. And editing it's not just dotting I's and crossing T's and looking for typos. It's making the story an enjoyable read, which I think is the tricky bit. And I think it's the one thing that makes it hardest for newer writers. Certainly from what I've read from people, that they don't seem to be able to read something and think, actually, that's clumsy. There's a writer I know, self-published, and they have published, crikey, about a dozen novels, maybe more, and they brought out a new novel, and I stopped buying them because I didn't enjoy them, and I just looked at the preview on Amazon, look inside, and within a page I'd found the same word repeated in 2 consecutive sentences. And it was a specific word. It wasn't just the or and or something. It was fought or something. I don't know. There was something, And I read that and I went, "Ow!" It just straight away it leapt out at me, and I thought, this hasn't been edited properly, and they thanked their editor and you know how wonderful a job they did, and I thought, not really. They might have found some typos, but they didn't really edit it. So so that's difficult for new writers who are intending to self-publish, and I think it's hard sometimes to get. You might think, oh, I'll get a friend to read my book, but if it's a substantial book, it's a big investment by a friend to read something for you and to then honestly critique it. So you know probably should send some chapters out, just a chapter, and say, what do you think, and look at what people suggest and look at what people are saying doesn't quite work. And then you might get an idea of what your writing is like and what it should be like.
I also pay attention when I'm writing at the end of a session, to set myself to kind of a session where I get on with it, and I pay attention to my head saying, if it's not satisfying to write, I don't think it's going to be very satisfying to read. And at the end of a day of Nano last week or sometime, I'd written virtually a whole chapter. It was a lot of words on the page, but I came away very unsatisfied. And overnight, as it was filtering, as it does, I woke up next morning and I knew exactly why it was unsatisfying. And it was because I told the story. I hadn't let the characters reveal the story. I hadn't put them in the middle of it and let it happen to them. I just said, this is what happened to them. And sometimes, I always can now, I put on my blog the other day that there are questions you can ask about a scene, about whether or not you're starting in the right place, whether this is the right point of view. I'm having real problems with this book on whose point of view, because I'm doing multiple viewpoints. Last time it was mostly started in first person, became too limited, and then I had to have multiple first person, with the other character taking chapters as well, and then a third person viewpoint for the other character. So that this is quite complicated in terms of who is the best person for this scene to be focused around, because it happens to more than one person. So whose point of view is it? And and also, how much of that do you tell and then come back to the parallel version from someone else, or have you already told that bit of the story? Do you need to come to someone else for the next bit of? Those are the issues and they're techniques of novel writing. It's not a technique of how well you can write, because you have to just assume that your writing is going to be okay. But it's those techniques of how you construct a novel in a way that's going to be interesting for the reader, as you say. And those are things that I've got no training in. I didn't do a creative writing master's, sadly. A lot of people seem to be doing them these days, and it's probably very good for you to do that. But I think that's sometimes where you need external help. And actually, I did have a little bit of training at film school in screenwriting, and my tutor, who was a Hollywood screenwriter, said to me for a short film I wrote, which was very successful in the end, this script I wrote, and he said, just go away and rewrite that scene completely from the other person's point of view, and take him out of it. And then another time he said, I want you to completely rewrite this scene in a different location, in a different setting. And gradually, by finding the right setting for the scene, if you always just have them sitting over a table chatting to each other, it can, using the background and the location to kind of add to the undercurrent of the themes you're trying to bring out. So if they're in a celebratory place, or if they're in a cave, or if they're up a mountain, or if they're, what I mean, on a bus travelling somewhere, how is that kind of enhancing the underlying message? So all of it, there's an awful lot, isn't there? And you just have to kind of do it without thinking consciously about those things. But if it's not working, then think, how could I make this work better?
Yeah, I think so, and I think that it really is only through experience that you learn by writing and by having people read what you've written It's only through that you can learn how to craft the story, and that's really the difficult thing, and I think that's what differentiates a successful writer from or a writer with the potential for success from a writer who's never really going to be successful. And I think the problem with self-publishing is that it's given people who probably wouldn't have been very successful writers the chance to think that they might be successful, and it's, for a lot of them, it's just not going to happen. And I see people all the time saying, my sales aren't very good, what can I do to sell more? And it's tweet this and Facebook that and have a mailing list and all this sort of stuff. But it's the bottom line is the writing, and if the writing isn't very good, you have to have someone that you trust tell you that it's not very good, and you have to listen to them and accept the criticism, and then learn how you can make your writing better. And that's the tricky thing.
We were discussing in the kitchen just before this, as we do while I'm cooking. We discuss books a lot in this house, and we were talking about what makes one book really take off and sell millions of copies, and another book not. And it's not that I'm trying to write a bestseller, that's not what I'm doing at all, but it's how do you tap into the reader's zeitgeist? I guess that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? If we could answer that, it would be no longer relevant because everyone would be doing it. But so what was it about Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code that sold millions of copies, as opposed to Angels and Demons, which he wrote first, which only sold 10,000 copies? Same writer, same kind of subject. And was it because he already had this wasn't his first book? We speculated that it might be something to do with tapping into universal truths or universal fears, universal things that are shared commonly by our humanity. And for me, love is one of those things. That's why I write, and it's not just about romantic love and superficial love and sex. That's not really what I write about, but it's about real depth of love that happens in other relationships as well, parents and children, and other things. And also, art is something I love, and I think art has a power to transform people's lives because it can make you think very differently, whatever the art is, not just pictures on the walls, but and so but tapping into the universal core things of people's fears. That's why things like, I think Harry Potter works really brilliantly. I love Harry Potter. My children were that age, the age of Harry Potter when it first came out, so we've grown up with it, and I think that taps into the core good and evil, doesn't it? Good fighting evil, and the fear of witchcraft and the fear of pagans, but turning that on its head and making it, And I think those kind of universal things that are shared by common humanity are very interesting themes for writing. And I think that but because they're universal, everyone's done, they've been done a lot. So finding a way of presenting that in a way that's not what everyone else has already done is the challenge. In terms of subject matter.
Yeah, I think one of the things I do just before and during Nano is I tend not to read much fiction, but I do read a lot of writing advice books and things like that. And yeah, I read something the other day that was the basic stories are very simple and never change, and they're all the same. I think this is a screenwriting book, so he listed a number of films which all had the same themes, but it was Jaws, Die Hard, or something, I don't know. But it's all sort of maybe Casablanca. But all these films had the same sort of theme and the same structure, and were basically the same film. But obviously they weren't the same. They were very, very different films. And I think as a writer, you need to write something that interests you as a writer, but you also need to write something that will interest the reader. And you also, to then elevate the book to a more successful book level, you have to have a theme, and you can't force a theme. You can't sort of say, I'm going to write this romance, or I'm going to write this crime or this thriller. What theme will I use? I think themes have to sort of infuse themselves into your thinking. There's nowhere that will list themes for you and allow you to choose one. The themes that bother you, that move you as a person, are the themes that you should write about as a writer. And that's why I think I said last night on the show that's why I'm writing apocalyptic fiction a lot, because there are lots of things in society at the moment that bother me, that I don't like, and that I think should change. But if I just talk about that, people are going to say, oh, yak, he's just talking rubbish. But I think if I write a piece of fiction that has this theme at the back of it, maybe I enjoy it more. I enjoy the story, and I enjoy the underlying theme because I'm getting my message across, and also I'm hoping that the readers will then take that message on and think, actually, this is a good story. I've enjoyed the story. It was well written, and there's a message here that's sort of not written on the cover, or it's not splattered across every page, but there's an underlying message, and I think what you were saying about sort of true love between different people is that sort of thing as well, isn't it? It's not something you can pick out of a box and use. It's something that's there.
No, I completely agree. I think themes have to come from inside, very much so, and I also think that when you read a book, art and reading books, literature, have the power to transform, because you can make people think differently about themselves and their world by how you present your painting or your play or your book. And it's something I've always felt, having a voice and being able to do that. I do it in quite a direct way by just writing mainstream women's fiction. And I don't know, but it has, from the feedback I've had, it does make people think a little bit, or reflect on how. And I know, because that's exactly what it does to me. If I read a book that really is compelling and I really want to carry on reading, it's because it's resonating somewhere with me. It doesn't mean I have to agree with it, with what it's saying, but it's actually touching things that I am inspired by or interested in, and hopefully challenging as well some of those preconceptions which we all have. Being challenged, I think, is quite important in the thinking.
I think so too. Yes, I think it's all about a message. It's all about moving people with your writing, and you can move people. It doesn't have to be literary fiction to move people. People can be moved by all sorts of fiction, and all sorts of, as you say, art as well, and film and dance. It's, all those things can sort of get through to people's souls and touch them and make them feel good, bad, happy, sad, anything. I don't know what I'm talking about, really. I just make it all up. So how would you sum up your self-publishing experience thus far?
I missed that. Sorry, the dog decided to turn over and scrape my paws on the wooden floor. Say it again.
How would you sum up your self-publishing experience over this past year?
I think it's been a fantastic and exciting journey. I really, really enjoyed it. I've loved every minute of it. I love every day clicking on CreateSpace and Kindle and checking my sales figures and going, oh, you know, wish I could say, but you know, I've really thoroughly enjoyed it. I think having a tangible thing that I've made is really nice. I love that, because otherwise it just lives in my head or in a drawer, and that's pointless. I've just really, I think it's been straightforward. I think it's been positive. You know, I don't expect always to get just good feedback. I'm sure there won't always be that. But I'm really, really keen to get this next book written so I can publish it. That's the whole point of doing it. To me, it's become the purpose. And also looking at the back catalogue and how much of that I can rewrite. Now I do know how to rewrite. I do know how to edit now, which I don't think I really did before. Then I'm really, but it's a lot of work, but it doesn't feel like work. You know, in my previous job, I'd have been, you know, quite resistant to so much work and giving myself such a heavy work. You know, but actually, I'm embracing it. I love it, and I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it is exciting, and I think as creators, we enjoy creating a thing, and as someone who wrote software for a large part of his career, that was okay, and getting software to work was quite interesting. But what really I enjoyed was, because I was working in engineering, was my software moving bits of machines around and operating robots and that sort of thing. So great, the creative side is wonderful and enjoyable, but having something tangible at the end, something that you can hold and feel and say, look, I did this, is a great sort of reward for all that work that you put in.
I think we're really fortunate in that, you know, I can enjoy the process of writing like everyone, but actually I also love the product. And I think it's that marrying up those two things of process and product. The process is really, really important to me, and it's just something I will always do, whether it's, you know, the old notebook sitting here on the desk. I've got 3 notebooks here that just sit around all the time in my handbag, you know. That will always happen, but actually turning it into something which goes out into the world, I think that's the ultimate aim.
Yeah, I think that's. I mean, like you, I had and still have a huge catalogue of half-finished, unfinished, unedited stuff. And looking back on them, when I did my collection of short stories, the basic ideas were pretty good, and I enjoyed reading what I'd written. But some of it wasn't very well written at all. Some of it was a bit, you know, baggy and a bit didn't really work. But having written in them intervening times, I could then go back to that, and I knew how to edit them to be a better story. And yeah, like you, I've got all these other things in a big long list, and thinking, how does that fit in with what I'm writing now? And some of the longer works I've written, with a few changes, would then fit in with what I'm enjoying writing now, and would be companion pieces to the things I'm going to be publishing soon. So it's important that even that you are prepared to write stuff that you're not happy to release into the world, but you keep it there. And at some point in the future, you'll be able to pick it up and say, that, you know, there's a concept, there's a good idea there, and I can take that, add it, change it, rewrite it, and it then becomes a much better piece and you know, a better work to put out there and self-publish.
It's when my 3-year-old granddaughter picked up my book and said, "Here's your book, what you wrote about Nanny," and I just thought, great, she's growing up with the idea that that's what I do, and it's going to be a very different world for her anyway, and it's certainly, you know, for me, that to me was very special.
Yeah, I always tell the tale that the first time I got an email or a message from someone I didn't know, I'd had no contact with, but they'd seen me talking about writing and found my books by some means or other, and had bought them, and then contacted me and said, "I really like your writing. I enjoyed your books. Let me know when you've got something else out." And all of a sudden, that's it. I'm a writer. Someone I don't know likes what I've done. So, like with your granddaughter, that was a defining moment for me, and really made me realise that I could be a writer. I'm not going to get rich from it, but I'm quite happy to call myself a writer now.
I think that's the thing. I think you call yourself a writer when it's at the centre of your life and everything else dances around it, not when you're just slotting it into the few cracks that are left around. And it is hard to do that. Most of us do have a full life anyway, but this is the first time in my life I've been able to do that and just put it right at the centre. And that's kind of what I do and who I am. And I think to define yourself, and then that you have to be doing it. And I think the daily writing challenge is a way of making sure that you continue to write daily. That was my challenge for this year. I haven't managed it every day. I haven't even managed it every day at Nano. But taking the challenge and trying to stick to that, I think is just do the best. And like you, I think my ultimate aim is to have that row of shelves over there with my books.
Determination. We'll get there. We might have to share a shelf, but get there somehow. Okay, I think we should probably call it an evening there. I'll put the best place for people to find out what you've been doing and what you're up to is to go to your website, which is anitabelli.com, and I'll put that link in the show notes, of course. And your collection of short stories and The Art Forger's Daughter can be bought via that website, and hopefully The Ties That Bind soon, sometime next year. But yeah, it's having
Easter.
Okay.
Easter next year is the target, my target date. So I'm going to try and stick to that. We'll keep in touch, and I'll let you know.
Brilliant. No, that's good. It's even if you miss targets, at least you're setting a target and you're working towards it. You're not just sort of saying I can't do that and do something else. So that's a good idea. My target of 3 more published works for this year isn't going to be matched, but I'll give it a go. Okay then. Well, thank you very much, Anita. Really appreciate you coming on. Really enjoyed it, and I'm sure there's some interesting stuff for people to pick up on there, especially if they're interested in self-publishing. And I'll catch up with you probably on Facebook, as with everyone else.
Brilliant.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Anita. See you soon.